Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Shara on March 13th signed a temporary constitution, which will be in force for a 5-year transitional period. The temporary constitution has set up a People's Committee that will serve as an interim parliament until a permanent constitution is adopted and elections held. As per reports, 2/3 of its members will be appointed by a committee selected by the interim president and 1/3 by al-Shara himself. The development comes 3 months after his forces led a lightning offensive that toppled Bashar al-Assad's government. As he signed the document, al-Shara said he hoped the constitutional declaration would mark the start of a new history for Syria, where oppression will be replaced with justice.
God willing, this will be a new history for Syria, one in which we replace injustice with justice, we replace destruction with construction, and we replace ignorance with knowledge, God willing, and in which we also replace suffering with mercy.
According to the declaration signed by al-Shara, Syria will retain Islamic jurisprudence as the main basis of law and will preserve freedom of opinion and expression.
We kept the religion of the head of state as Islam. The history of this article tells us that it was a compromise between those who wanted to define the state's religion and those who refused. The constitutional solution was for the religion of the head of state to be specified. We are certain that, just as our ancestors reached consensual formulations to resolve their constitutional differences, the children are capable of doing so in a permanent constitution. We also kept Islamic jurisprudence as the primary source of legislation. The first chapter declares the commitment of the Syrian Arab Republic to the Human Rights Conventions ratified by the Syrian state. This text constitutes a precedent in the history of the Syrian constitution, as the former regime had previously signed international conventions regulating human rights without any commitment. Hence, the necessity of stipulating commitment to them came. The Constitutional Declaration also stipulated many rights and freedoms, including freedom of opinion, expression, media, publication, and the press.
Abdulhamid al-Awaq, one of the 7 members of the Temporary Constitution Drafting Committee, said the Constitution will balance between social security and freedom. Al-Awaq said the temporary Constitution will set up an absolute and rigid separation between legislative, executive, and judicial authorities.
Our first task was to put the political system on a constitutional footing by adhering to the characteristics of the political system. Because the principle of separation of powers was absent from political systems, we resorted to a complete separation of powers.
Al-Awaq said women's right to participate in work and education and have all their social, political, and economic rights guaranteed is enshrined in the temporary constitution. He added that the temporary constitution gives the president the exceptional power to declare a state of emergency. Under the declaration, the legislature cannot impeach the president, nor can the president dismiss any lawmakers. Awaq said the executive power would also be restricted to the president in the transitional period while affirming the independence of the judiciary. He said the declaration guarantees the freedom of opinion, expression, and the press. The Kurdish-led and U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, administration in northeastern Syria sharply criticized the constitutional declaration, saying it contradicted the reality of Syria and its diversity. It stated that the draft lacked the spirit of Syria's people and its various components from Kurds to Arabs, as well as Syriacs, Assyrians, and other Syrian national components. On March 10th, the de facto army of the Kurdish-led administration, the Syrian Democratic Forces, struck a deal with the authorities in Damascus to be integrated into state institutions. According to a report by The Guardian, the declaration stated, calls for division and separatism, requests for foreign intervention, or reliance on foreign powers are criminalized. However, to offer additional specifics on the matter. Besides, the declaration added that the government seeks to coordinate with relevant countries and entities to support the reconstruction process. Meanwhile, the administration on March 13th claimed that
the declaration does not represent the aspirations of our people and undermines efforts to achieve true democracy.
Critics say that al-Shara's National Dialogue Conference in February, calling for the temporary constitution and holding interim parliamentary elections, was not inclusive of Syria's different ethnic and sectarian groups or civil society. On March 13th, Israeli warplanes struck a building in the suburbs of Damascus as the country's interim president signed the temporary constitutional declaration. The latest attack happens to be the first airstrike in the Syrian capital since al-Sharia established control of the country in 2024. The Israeli military claimed to have hit a headquarters for the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group that has a major presence in the besieged Gaza Strip and fighters in the occupied West Bank. It said the strike was intended as a warning to Sharia, claiming that Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or PIJ, was planning attacks on Israel from that location. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz, in a statement, said,
"Wherever terrorist activity is organized against Israel, the leader of extremist Islam, Jolani, will find Air Force planes circling above him."
The Palestinian Islamic Jihad on Telegram denied that it was a headquarters for the Iran-backed group and said the building which was struck had been empty.
It is totally a civilian neighborhood. There are no military bases, as the Israeli occupation claims. Also, there are not offices of the Islamic Jihad movement in Mashru Dumar neighborhood. This was a house of the Secretary General of Islamic Jihad, and it has been closed for 5 years, and none of the Islamic Jihad cadres frequented it. This is a message by the Israeli occupation that it wants to pressure the Islamic Jihad movement. It wants to pressure the negotiators in order for them to offer compromises in the prisoners' files.
The White Helmet's first responders said the strike had destroyed a residential building in the Dummer area and injured 3 people, with 1 man in serious condition and 2 women being treated for minor injuries. Meanwhile, claiming that the IDF had attacked Islamic Jihad targets in the Syrian capital, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said,
"Hello, citizens of Israel. Another short update from me. This morning we attacked the headquarters of the Islamic Jihad in the heart of Damascus. We do this because we have clear policy. Those who attack us, or plan to attack us, we attack them. This applies not only in Syria, it applies everywhere.